So with almost all of my clients being relocation and moving to Nashville from another state, as you can imagine, I get asked a lot of the same questions over and over and over again from people who are reaching out to move here, reaching out from this YouTube channel. A lot of you guys have the same questions. So in this video, I wanted to tackle just some of those frequently asked questions that I get, just to try to get those taken care of in one video. Now, if I don't touch on one, definitely drop that in the comments so that we can get that answered for you as well. Hopefully this will cover a lot of the questions that you have, and we can go more in depth if you need. You can always book a time to talk directly with me. You can do that in the comments or in the description. I've got, my contact information there. You can call, text, email. There's also a Calendly link. If you want to book a time to talk directly with me, you can do that too. But hopefully we can get some of these covered on here as well. But we're going to start out with one of the most obvious questions. And then another one that I get that is really heartfelt by people is going to be the last one. And for some people, one of the most important ones as well. A lot goes into moving. I have a lot of empathy. I was born and raised in Tennessee, but over towards the Knoxville area, but I did live a lot of years in Colorado as well. So I know what it takes to move back and forth across the country, and I do have so much empathy for people who are moving. It's not an easy task. It's a big undertaking, and there's just so much to think about. So I'm with you on this one. So again, don't hesitate to ask me whatever questions you need just to kind of help you figure out if this is the right move for you, if that's what you're trying to do. But even if you are moving here, just to kind of help you with that process, that's what I'm here for. So, and my name is Jennifer Gramling. I'm a real estate agent in the area, so don't hesitate to reach out. But we're going to go ahead and start with that number one question, and that's going to be the most obvious one. Like I said, is Nashville affordable? Now, of course, this is going to change, and this is going to depend on where you're coming from. So, but just to take a look, let me just show you this. Okay, so we're going to start here, and then I'm going to jump over and just show you a couple of other things. But according to Rent Cafe, and this was pretty similar to other websites, we're going to be about 1% lower than the national average for cost of living here in the Nashville area. We are going to be 9% higher, according to them, for the state of Tennessee. So if you're, considering different cities within the state of Tennessee, this is actually going to be one of the higher, more expensive places that you can live. Now, I will say that with the caveat that, that's going to depend, a lot of this does depend on housing. So housing in Nashville is going to be a lot more expensive than some of the other cities that you might be considering in Tennessee. So that is one thing that's going to bring our cost of living up a little bit higher. We are going to touch on some other things though, but you can see that we are 1% higher than the national average on housing, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that in just a second. It says we're 2% lower on utilities. So we're about the same on food, 4% lower on healthcare, 9% lower on transportation, and 1% lower on goods and services. I will say that goods and services is one of the things that people do complain about a little bit when they move to Tennessee. So I'll talk about that in just a second. But if we're talking about things like utilities, those tend to be a little bit lower, especially if you're coming from somewhere like California. We obviously have no state income tax, which everybody already knows that. I really thought our sales tax was very high at about 9%, but then I learned that a lot of other states, they're actually even more expensive than that. So maybe that's not bad coming from where you come from. But then our property tax is one of the things. So if you're comparing states like Texas, you're probably going to find a house that's less expensive in Texas, but the property taxes that you're going to pay there are going to be a lot more. Same with the Midwest, same with the Northeast. So our property taxes here, just to give you kind of an idea on what property taxes are in Tennessee, or actually in this middle Tennessee area, you can just kind of figure it's going to be about 0.5% of the purchase price of the house. I won't break down all the math on that for you, but I can if you want to get in touch with me, and I can show you the different tax rates and how that all works out, but going to be about 0.5%. And then homes are reassessed every 4 years or so. But so in a lot of areas, it's just slightly under that. So you can figure, on about $1 million house, about $4,700 a year in taxes or so, just to give you kind of an idea. And then that would mean on a $500,000 house, about $2,300, $2,400 or so, just to give you some kind of rough numbers. Again, I can break that down further if you want. But car registration here, that's one place where people are really, really happy. I know like in Colorado, you're paying sometimes $1,000 plus to register your car every single year, especially on a newer, bigger car. Here in Tennessee, you're going to be paying right around $60, $70 a year to register your cars. So that's really great. All of these costs, the goods and services though, are the ones that people do tend to kind of complain about, like getting your nails done, getting your hair done, the cost for contractors and things, just doing general work in your home. A lot of times I do think those tend to run a little bit higher than they might in other states. So that's something just to kind of think about as well. But chances are are, you're probably saving a lot of money in other areas when you're moving here, especially on those property taxes, gas, all of those things. But just do plan to pay, I think, a little bit more on those goods and services, dog grooming, all of these kinds of things I do think tend to cost a little bit more here in Tennessee. Okay, so if we flip over just to show you some median home prices, just to give you an idea, because like I said, this is going to be the place where you're going to get the biggest difference in cost of living between different cities in Tennessee and, throughout the United States, wherever you're moving from. But the median home price just in Nashville is going to be $873,000. So that's pretty high compared to the national average, with the median sale price being about $600,000, as you can see right here, actually $600,000 on the dot. If you look at what Redfin has as the national average, their median home sale price is about $440,000. So that's compared to $600,000. So, about $160,000 more in Nashville. So, but that's just Nashville. If you want to take a look at some different areas, and that's where it's really going to get skewed. So you've got some of the most expensive real estate in Tennessee in the Nashville area. One of those areas is going to be Brentwood. So if you look at Brentwood, you've got the average sale price of almost $2 million, with the median being 1.44. So that's $1 million over. That's almost exactly $1 million over the national average of $440,000 here in the Brentwood area. But there are more affordable areas as well. You've got Hendersonville, which I pulled up right here. Their average sale price is $608. The median is $565. So that's only $100,000, $120,000 over the national average. And then I also pulled up another area called Smyrna, which is going to be $435. So that's actually under the national average. So there are other more affordable places to live. So if you're only seeing places like Brentwood, Franklin, and some of the more, Williamson County type of areas, those are going to be a lot more expensive and way over the national average. But there are plenty of places where you can live in the Nashville area, like Smyrna, which is actually under the national average. So it is possible to do that. You've got Smyrna, Murfreesboro, a lot of places where you can find more affordable housing just kind of outside of that Williamson County area, because that does tend to get pretty pricey, and in some parts of the Nashville area as well. But there are a lot of great options for more affordable homes in the Nashville area. So definitely don't let that scare you, and don't let these numbers scare you, because while you may want to live in some of those more expensive areas, if that's not really what your budget is, we can find you something in a more affordable area that's also super nice. So don't let that scare you. But overall, just looking at the numbers, at least according to this data, and actually multiple sites that I saw, we're really only about 1% under the national average. So we're kind of average. Okay, moving on to question number 2. And this one might be kind of funny to you, but it's surprisingly, I get this question a lot, especially once people have come in town and driven around. So I guess I'm not used to anything else, but people ask all the time, can you have fences in your yards in Tennessee? But I actually see lots of fences. But I guess compared to other cities or other states where people have lived, they look around and they see all these open yards and things. So not everyone has a fence, but there are lots of fences here. But yes, you can have a fence in your yard. So maybe this looks a little bit different to where you're coming from, but even the neighborhoods that have HOAs and things, I've never seen a neighborhood that does not allow a fence. A lot of people have pets, they have children, or they just, want their privacy. So, but if you are in a neighborhood that does have an HOA, sometimes they will maybe specify what type of fence you can have. Maybe it's going to be a wrought iron. Maybe they don't like the privacy fences, but you will be allowed some kind of fence depending on the neighborhood. So if it's important to you to have a certain kind of fence, then definitely you'll want to check those HOA restrictions before buying in a certain neighborhood. But I've never seen a neighborhood that did not allow a fence. But I just thought it was funny how many times I get this question about, can I have a fence in Tennessee? So we must look a lot different here than it looks in some other states. But yes, you can have a fence. Okay, another big one I get all the time is, are there tornadoes and is there flooding? So first, let's touch on the flooding. So actually, there's not tons of flooding here in the Nashville area, but it can happen just like anywhere else. But you just kind of have to know where those areas are, or those low-lying areas. The great thing is that any properties that you're looking at on RealTracs, it's linked to the tax records, which is also linked to FEMA. So most listings, if it's in a flood zone, will be listed on the property so that you can see it easily. But we always check those flood zone records for you if we're looking at a property. So if there's something that you're interested in, and you know what, a lot of times I can even just tell, either because I already know and I've already, know the area, you can just tell by days on market and the price point. If you're like, wow, this house is in Franklin and this is a really great price point and it hasn't moved, it might be in a flood zone. But that's not the rule. That's more the exception. But if they are close to the river, close to the Harpeth River, or just in really flat or low-lying areas, those might be flood zones as well. So it's just important to pay attention to the FEMA map and just know those flood zones and have a great realtor like me who is going to let you know if a property is in a flood zone or not. And then that's up to you if you want to go ahead and move forward and investigate that property more. But it does happen, yes, but it's just something to be aware of. And then the second thing on that is going to be the tornadoes. Are there tornadoes? So yes, there are tornadoes that come through Tennessee, as you probably see on the news. Just like anywhere else, we do have some severe weather that comes through the Nashville area. The important thing to know about tornadoes is just to kind of be aware. There's actually two really great sites on YouTube that I pay attention to all the time, and I will actually link those in the comments. So one of them is Ryan Hall, y'all. He is fantastic. He also has an app and a website. So I am not affiliated with him. He does not know me, but I do love his channel a lot. So definitely go follow him on YouTube. And then there's also Nashville Severe Weather. So Nashville Severe Weather, they're also on Facebook and YouTube. They're actually in Williamson County. They really only talk about Williamson County and Davidson County. So kind of Nashville, Williamson County area. So if you're in that area, they are great ones to follow as well. But if you're outside of those areas, you might want to more focus on Ryan. But I love both of them very much, but they are so amazing in following these storms. So if you know that there's severe weather coming through Nashville, I just turn on their channels, especially if I know, they can tell you, oh, there's going to be a severe storm coming through at 2:00 in the morning. So, I go to bed, I set an alarm if I know that there's storms coming through, and they will tell you down to the street where the storm is and if you need to take cover or something like that. So, and the important thing is just to have a plan. If there's a storm coming through, you just go to an interior room, but it can happen. So, but typically, if you're watching these guys, you'll know where storms are down to the street. You can watch it pass by, go south of you, go north of you, and then you can go back to bed once it's over. But, severe weather does happen in the Nashville area, in some parts more than others. So you can check weather maps, and there's actually data and stats on that. So I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm not going to try to tell you what parts of town get hit more than others with some of that severe weather, but definitely something that you can investigate as well. And I will, like I said, link those guys in the comments so that you can find their YouTube channels as well, because they are fantastic to watch. I just, really grateful for them because, without them and just without having the information might be a little bit harder and a little bit more scary. But there are great tornado shelters. If you're concerned and you're scared, either try to find a home with a basement, but then there's also tornado shelters that you can buy. Put them right in your garage. They bolt them to the floor. So, if a storm is coming and you're concerned, you can always go in there as well and just shelter in there if you need to. Okay, on to number 4. Okay, so this one I actually get more than the tornado question, which is kind of funny. And that's, is the humidity going to be a deal breaker? So I am not going to lie, there are some months where it does get more humid here and it does get more hot. That's going to be those summertime months of, middle of June, July, August. So it's really going to be about 3 months. So take this from me. So like I said, I was born and raised here. I don't even really think I knew what humidity was when I lived here before, because when you grow up in it, you're just used to it. So somebody who's grown up here their whole life, they may not even really know what you're talking about. But then I moved away. I moved to Colorado. I lived there for a lot of years where it's ultra dry. And then I moved back. And when I would come back, in the summertime or whatever, I would be like, okay, now I get it. Now I get what people are complaining about with the humidity. So there is that humidity in the summertime. The rest of the year, it's actually really great. So it doesn't feel humid the rest of the year, but there are 3 months where it can get kind of sticky and it can get kind of warm. So in those summertime months, you're usually going to be somewhere in the 90s is going to be those temperatures, the 80s to the 90s, but you are going to have a much higher humidity. It's not going to be humidity like you're going to have in Florida or somewhere like that. And there are days when it's not that humid, but if you don't like humidity, you've really only got 3 months or so to get through where it's going to be hotter and humid. On those times, you obviously have air conditioning. Air conditioning sucks all that moisture out of the air in your house. So in your house, you're not going to feel humid. And if you don't really love that, maybe don't go out for a run in the middle of the day and then, work out inside or, whatever the case may be. But if you want to avoid the outdoors, you can, but it's really only 3 months where it's going to be much more hot. And like I said, it's not every single day that it's going to be hot and sticky and just a wall of heat when you go outside. So it's really not unbearable. I haven't had any clients move here so far that have told me that the humidity is unbearable, and almost all of them are going to be from somewhere with less humidity from here. Not always, but a lot of times. So yes, it can get hot and humid, really only going to be a handful of months out of the year. The rest of the year is absolutely beautiful here. The weather is really great, which leads me to number 5, which is going to be, do we get snow? So we do get all 4 seasons here. We've got a beautiful spring, a beautiful fall. Winter is definitely winter. So it does get colder. Temperatures tend to stay around 30 degrees-ish in the winter time. They can get down in the 20s. You'll get an occasional cold snap where it will get colder than that, but usually 20s and 30s, is about as cold as it gets here. And then you will usually get just a couple of snows a year. So we usually get just maybe 2, and you maybe get a couple of inches of snow with that. Usually you're not getting tons and tons of snow. Occasionally on an off year, you might get a little bit more, but a few inches of snow a couple times a year is about all you're going to get. Now, to note, when that does happen though, school will probably be out for at least a week to a week and a half. So don't let that surprise you. But always, I'll see people commenting on posts and Facebook and things where they're like, why is school out? I had no problem getting up to the Kroger. Well, that's because if there's still any ice left over on back roads, and a lot of these counties in those back roads where there's no snow plows, and there's actually no snow plows really anywhere because we don't have enough snow to warrant that, but where roads don't get treated, where there's no salt, things like that happen in those back roads, if buses can't travel those roads to go pick up kids, then they have to cancel school for the entire county. So just keep that in mind. That's why school is going to be out when your main roads, if you're in, downtown Brentwood or downtown Nashville, and the streets are clear and the sun has dried it all up, there's probably some back roads that are really shaded by trees, then melt, then got icy, and that goes on, overnights for like a week before it totally melts, and school will still be out because of those back roads. So that's why school is out for longer than you might expect when those back roads are still a little bit icy. But it does get cold here. You are going to get a couple of snows probably, but everybody loves to see that snow. You don't want to be out driving on the curvy back roads either. So you're just going to want to plan to stay home, stay warm, and enjoy those snow days when you get them. Okay, on to number 6. How bad is the traffic? So again, this one's going to be kind of relative to where you're coming from. Our traffic can be kind of bad, especially in some of the smaller towns, which is kind of, a little bit different. On the highways, you're going to have some highways that are a little worse than others. On I-24, going from Murfreesboro up into Nashville, that one can get pretty jammed up. That can be one of the worst, but there's actually a lot of highways that get really, really congested. 65 going from Franklin and Brentwood up to Nashville can get congested, and then some of that traffic that's going north up into Hendersonville can get pretty bad as well. So, really all of the freeways during those typical rush hour periods can get, kind of decent, but, compared to where I've lived before, it's actually not that bad. But, the one thing that I just always tell people to do is to get on Google Maps and map from somewhere. So if you're thinking about living in Franklin or somewhere, map it from Franklin to downtown Nashville or wherever you're going to have to commute to, at the time of day that you would be doing that, just to get an idea on different days of what that commute's going to look like and see if that's something that you can do or something that, you don't really want to sign up for. But, going into some of the smaller towns, especially when you've got those single lane roads, going into some of the smaller towns as more people start to move into there, they're trying to widen roads. They're trying to put in turn lanes and stoplights and all of those things. And that can tend to make traffic a lot worse before it makes it better. So that is happening in some of those small towns as well. So all part of the growing pains of people moving to the area. So just something to be aware of. But like I said, the easiest way to know if there's traffic that you can deal with in that area is just map it during that time of day when you would be commuting, just to get an idea, and do that multiple different times. Because of course it can change if there's bad weather, things like that. If there's a wreck or an accident, it's obviously going to be a lot worse than it would be like on a regular day. But in my opinion, traffic in the Nashville area, it's not too terrible, but that's definitely relative to other places I have lived. Number 7, funny enough, people will ask if it's all just cowboy boots and country music. And that's just, really funny to me. So, but if you go downtown and you go down to Broadway, that's going to be where that strip of the honky tonks is and all of those things, that really touristy area of Nashville. It's going to be like your Beale Street, your French Quarter, or like the Strip in Vegas, one of those sorts of places. So probably not somewhere that you're going to hang out every day. If you live in town, I basically never go down there other than if I'm going to a show at the Ryman or I'm going to see a concert or like a sporting event, something like that. Not really hanging out on Broadway myself, but that's going to be where all of your bachelorette parties are and those sorts of things. And that is a lot of country music and cowboy boots. But there's also some really great bands who play down there who are not country music. And then in and around Nashville, you've got tons and tons of places where you can go see live music that is not country music. All genres here, tons of great music, songwriters, people that you can go see and enjoy. Some of it's country, some of it's not. But outside of that, no, everything is not cowboy boots. You don't really see that on a daily basis. But aside from that, no, the culture is not all cowboy boots and cowboy hats here in Nashville. I'm sure you probably know that, but I do get that question, which I just think is kind of funny. But there's, as far as music goes, tons of different genres to enjoy here in concert, in small venues, big venues, songwriter rounds, like just so much great music here. And it's not all country, which is, one of the really great things about living in Nashville is just your access to seeing some of the greatest songwriters and musicians around. So that is one thing you definitely want to take advantage of if you're living in Nashville. Okay, number 8. Okay, so I get this a lot. Is this a good place to raise a family? And is this a good place to retire? So I would say yes to both. So is this a good place to raise a family? I mean, you've got so many things to offer here for families, but really Nashville appeals to all different demographics. So, not only do you have tons and tons of great outdoor activities here that kids and families can take advantage of, you've got tons of cultural things that you can take advantage of here as well. Downtown, not only do you have the music and those sort of things that we've talked about, you've got things like the symphony, you've got the art museums, there's botanic gardens, there's museums, there's so many things to take advantage of just educational wise and just entertainment wise as far as kids go. But there's tons of school systems here in the area as well that are getting, higher ratings on greatschools.org or niche.com, things like that, if that's how you're choosing your school. As agents, we're not allowed to tell you what's a good school system or a bad school system. And some of that is just going to be relative to what you're looking for in your own school. There's tons of great STEM programs, magnet schools, private schools, schools that are great at sports, but a lot of different opportunities for kids as far as schools go here. But then also for retirees, like there's tons of great retirement communities as well. So Del Webb has lots of great communities here. Pulte is about to start a brand new one. Epcon is building communities here. So lots of really cool 55 plus communities going in here. Oh, and the one out in West Haven, we can't forget that one as well. So the 55 plus section of West Haven is absolutely beautiful. But again, so many advantages to retiring here in the Nashville area as well. As we talked about, with there being no state income tax, that really helps retirees. The lower property taxes, especially where they're moving from. There's a lot of savings to be had living in the Nashville area. If you're living on a fixed income, once you've kind of moved into that full retirement, a lot of these things can be a benefit to you, just paying some of those lower car registrations and things like that. So we do have some great 55 plus and retirement type communities in here. Lots of great outdoor activities, but some of those tax savings and just cost of living savings really help people on a fixed income to be able to come here and retire a lot more comfortably as well. So just something to think about if you're moving for either one of those reasons. That's a big draw for both of those demographics to move here to the Nashville area. Okay, number 9, I get an awful lot, and this one's a little bit harder to answer, and that is, where is the best place to live? And that answer obviously depends a lot on you and what you're kind of looking for. Sometimes people come with a certain idea of a neighborhood and they describe something to me like West Haven, which is a planned community in Franklin that's very, very distinct. So if someone comes to me and describes that type of neighborhood, it's really easy to say, I really think you're going to like this West Haven community. Or if you're looking for something rural or more of like a farm property, those sorts of things. But sometimes there's lots of different options. And it's funny because some people will come in town and it's like, one will be looking at, say, Mount Juliet and say, I'm really interested in Mount Juliet or this other town. One of them will go to Mount Juliet and absolutely love it. And then the next client will come in town and not be as big of a fan of Mount Juliet. And other than the fact that it just didn't feel as good to them as it did to the other person, it's just personal preference sometimes, or just aesthetically, the way that things look. Some people prefer one thing over the other. So sometimes there's multiple towns that can fit. And one of the best things to do, if that's you, is to come in town and just spend a couple of days just going to each one. And I always encourage people just to spend some time going to the restaurants, going to the shopping areas, just see which one feels a little bit more like you, because a couple of different towns could work for you. Maybe it's Hendersonville or Mount Juliet, but maybe you go to both of them and you like one more than the other. And that's kind of where we settle on looking for a house for you. So that really helps a lot to be able to just put boots on the ground, spend some time in some of these areas and decide which one kind of feels a little bit better to you when you're there, because sometimes it just comes down to that between the two. But this is definitely a question that's answerable. It's just something that, we would spend some time on the phone with you, just over Zoom, trying to get an idea of what you like and what you don't like, price points, what you're looking for in a neighborhood or a property, just trying to, narrow some of those down to areas that you would really like, and then hopefully get you to be able to spend a little bit of time in each one of those, even if it's just, half a day. And then we can narrow it down from there on where you would best fit to live. So we can answer that question. Sometimes it takes a little bit more digging. Sometimes it's super duper obvious, especially if you want to be in downtown Nashville, like in the Gulch or, walking distance to downtown or something like that. It's obviously a little bit easier to pinpoint some of those, but especially out in the suburbs, sometimes just takes a little bit of question and answer to get to the right answer, but we can can get there. So don't worry about that, but that is a question that I get really frequently, obviously. Okay, and number 10, this is the big one, always makes me a little bit sad because people ask me all the time, will I be welcome there? And the answer is yes. Like, you know, I know that there's people, especially in like Facebook forums, things like that say Tennessee is full, you know, keyboard warriors who say certain things or whatever. I have never met one of those people in real life here in this area ever. I've never met someone who would say to someone else, like, go back where you came from. I've never ever seen anyone who, you know, thinks like that or acts like that, at least not to anyone's face. So, you know, people could be thinking that, but I've never ever heard anyone say that. So I've never had a client, you know, report back after moving here that they did not feel welcome here. And that just makes me really happy because really everyone who calls me, all of my clients who call me, especially from YouTube, I just really like them a lot. They're great people. Why wouldn't they be welcome here? So that's the thing. Like, I do get that question off a lot. You know, are there going to be people that, you know, don't want us there? Well, in answer to that, there may be, I don't know, but I haven't met any of those people. I'm not one of those people. So I think you're going to be fine. You're going to be in good company. There are obviously lots of other people who have moved here. And that's not just Nashville. That's everywhere. That's Knoxville. That's Denver. That's, you know, everywhere. People are moving into these states from everywhere. And so you're going to find plenty of people, make new friends. You're going to acclimate. It's going to be fine. So if you're asking yourself that question, you're wondering if you will be welcome in Tennessee, you will be fine. Don't worry about that at all. So that's it. Those are the top 10 questions that I get when people are moving in or thinking about moving to Tennessee from other places. So if there's any questions that I forgot, I'm sure that there's questions that you have that were not answered. Please drop those in the comments and we will try to get those answered. So I am an agent in the area, obviously. So if you have questions at all about moving here or relocating, don't hesitate to reach out, call, text, email, however you want to get in touch, and we can get any and all of those relocating questions answered. I'm helping people just like you all the time relocate to the area. But please give this video a like if this was helpful to you. Don't forget to subscribe. We have tons of great videos coming out on this channel. Do a lot of city tours, neighborhood tours, just try to get you all the answers of questions that you might have if you're thinking about moving to the area. Try to get you more familiar with the neighborhood so that you can see them with your own eyes if you're moving here. If there's a neighborhood that you want to see, definitely reach out. You can message me. We can try to get that video made as well. So yeah, just try to put out as much content as we can, trying to get you familiar with this area if you're thinking about moving here. So again, please reach out. You've seen the QR code throughout the video. You can always fill out the form on there. So don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next video.